Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ketogenic Fasting Project. My name is Tom, and I just want to do a quick video about making pemmican. Um, Pemmican is kind of popular these days. It's gotten some notoriety. A lot of people, of course, on a carnivore diet, um, might make something like that. Here's some. Here's something I made right here. Whoop. It is a rather dense food. Kind of looks like a brownie or something. This particular recipe I want to talk about is one that I just kind of made up based on nutritional requirements. So I was recently on the PKD diet, and I was recommended to eat a ratio of 2-to-1 fat over protein. So that's how I devised this. I'm not eating any plant foods. So I didn't flavor it with berries or anything, which is kind of a popular, if not traditional method. So I'm just going to run through how I made it real quick. And yeah, it tastes great. So it's a good tasting, it's a good tasting food, and supposedly this lasts a long time. There's accounts in the literature. I forget exactly which book I read it in, but I believe that some pemmican was found stashed somewhere that was at least 20 years old. It might have been something like 24 years old, and it was still edible, still essentially tasted the same. So this is sort of a pretty interesting idea because it's you might consider it a processed food, but there's very little in the way of processing, and there's no crazy ingredients or preservatives or anything like we think of in modern processed foods. So I thought it was pretty interesting. So let me get on to telling you a little more about it. Hopefully you're seeing this. This is a little definition for pemmican. I believe it's from dictionary.com. And it says a paste or dried paste of dried pounded meat mixed with melted fat and other ingredients originally made by North American Indians and later adapted by Arctic explorers. So anyways, I give you some idea. I don't know if that's the official definition, but just for people who are new to the idea, I give you some idea that, I live in the United States, and I live in this, I guess, essentially the Southwest. So talks of things like pemmican have been around since I was a kid. I think we learn about it in school when we're little kids, and you'll see a brand of like beef jerky at the store called pemmican. So I have to start with lean cuts of meat like this. I think this is probably a top round or a bottom round or something like that. So you can see there's not a lot of fat on it. It's easy to clean up. I make a lot of jerky and dried meat. I eat it. My dogs eat it. My friends eat it. We all kind of enjoy it. So, and, dried meat or jerky lasts a long time. Sometimes if you leave too much fat in it, the fat can go rancid. But I've never really had that problem. But I know it's a potential problem. So I tend to cut it down pretty lean. So if you start with a nice lean cut of meat like this, it's pretty easy to get the fat off. And then when you cut these types of meats, typically they're thought of as being tough pieces of meat. They're very dense, but when you cut it across the grain and then you dry it, it tends to be pretty easy to chew or break apart because the grain will actually open up as it's drying. So you can add salt to it. I know back before I was low carb and all that, I used to get teriyaki sauce and soak it in that, and it made just amazing beef jerky. I've gotten used to eating it plain or with salt now. I might experiment with some other flavors. I had psoriasis and arthritis really bad, so I was kind of leery about introducing foods, but it's going to happen little by little. So I might add in some flavors. Maybe I'll try blueberry or something. Wild berries are kind of a traditional way of seasoning the food. So, and the sugar actually acts as a preservative. So, I imagine if you use just a little bit of berry or something, you're not going to get much sugar anyways. So, this is another cut. I forget what this roast is called, but it's similar to the top round. But as you can see, it's pretty lean. It's easy to trim this fat off. So, it's just another example that you could use. This is a piece that's been perforated. I forgot to include a picture of the perforator, but it's basically a mechanical tenderizer. It stabs into the meat and punches little holes in it. This makes it a little more tender, a little easier to tear apart. If you're cutting your meat and you notice it's tough, then you can hit it with this tenderizer, and then when it's drying, like I said, the grain will open up even more. And of course, with the perforations in it, it will dehydrate even faster. Here's a little close up. Oh, got to go back. That's a piece of liver. You could take the liver and just cut it into thin slices. A lot of times you can buy frozen liver real inexpensively, and it's already sliced. The butchers at the store, the meat cutters, they'll typically cut it thin for you. That's a pretty common request. And a lot of times I'm going to buy a piece of liver like this. They'll offer to slice it for me. So anyways, that can save you a step, and liver can be kind of messy because it's generally kind of bloody and it's kind of slippery. So sometimes it's hard to hold on to, especially when you get into unusual shaped pieces and you're trying to cut them concisely. So, maybe let the butcher do it. This is the liver in the dehydrator I have. I think I have an LEM dehydrator. It's kind of dehydrator a lot of people use when they game hunt. So you process a pretty good amount. I think these trays are a little over a foot square, and there's 10 of them in there. I do the same thing with muscle meats as I do with like liver and stuff like that. So, and here's some of the dried meat afterward down here at the bottom. This is just regular muscle meat, like that would come from the fresh meat that I showed you earlier. And this is the liver in the back. You can see the liver is a darker, glossier color. So, and then this is tallow. This is tallow I rendered from beef fat. I get beef fat trimmings from the butchers to market. Sometimes they give it to me, and sometimes I pay for it. It just depends. But I think the most I've paid for it is like $2.29 a pound, so it's pretty cheap. And sometimes they give me some really nice meat that's still on the fat that I trim off. I've gotten, even when I was eating every day, I would get enough meat for 2 or 3 days sometimes off the trimming, and then also all kinds of beautiful fat. So this right here is where I've taken the dried beef or muscle meat and the dried liver, and put it in a food processor and chopped it up into like a powder. Of course, in the olden days, they used to just pound it. They'd pound it with something heavy, probably wood, a wooden pounder. They might also ground it on a rock pedestal, like a mortar and pestle type arrangement. I know you've probably seen that, some of those big rock pedestals that it's like a bowl shape, and they would use another rock or stone or sometimes a hard piece of wood to grind food in there. So that's probably how they did it in the olden days. But of course, a food processor makes pretty quick work of it. You do need to kind of put the dried meat in there slowly, because sometimes it's pretty substantial, and it'll stop even a pretty powerful food processor. So this one here is a pretty heavy duty one. It weighs a freaking ton. It's got a big motor in it, and it stopped on me a couple times. So I had to start over and just kind of feed it in like one piece at a time. You couldn't put more than one piece at a time in it, really, and unless of course you made small pieces of dried meat. Some of the pieces I made were pretty big. So this is kind of what it looks like. You could see the little bits of liver in there. I didn't measure the exact ratio, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 20% liver, and the rest is all beef. I'm not a huge fan of the flavor of liver, especially cooked liver, but I do do okay with raw liver and the dehydrated liver. They have much milder flavors, in my opinion, anyway. So I know some of my friends still don't like the even dehydrated liver. It like just tastes like liver to them. But I mixed it in. I think Tristan from Primal, is it Primal Edge? This is the name of his YouTube channel. Anyways, I think he talks about making pemmican with liver. I think he's mentioned that a few times. So he might have some good recipes if you are interested in that. So, but you get your muscle meat, you get your organs, and then when you mix it all together, you get this is tallow, and tallow is fat. So you get your muscle meat, you get your organ meat, and you get your fat all together. Now I weighed this out and I looked up the type of the cuts of meat that I used to see how much fat and protein and whatnot extraneous material was in there. Of course, they're dry now, so you want to look up dried meats because you're taking almost all the water out. And what I wanted in the end was twice as much fat as I had protein. And so that's how I did it. I measured it out. I figured, well, I've got this much meat, it's got this much protein in it, it's got a little bit of fat in it, and then I need to add enough fat so I have twice as much protein. And that's basically all I did. And there was a little bit of salt in there. And this here, you can see down here, this is the tallow melting, and this is the powdered or pounded processed meat that I'm stirring into it. Now, at the time when I was originally doing this, it didn't seem like enough tallow. I was like, man, this thing is going to fall apart or something. It's not going to have a nice consistency to it. But this is what it looked like when it was done. It got quite a bit darker. Now, there's no cooking or baking. There's just melting the tallow, which melts at a fairly low temperature. Say roughly 100 degrees or so, and it's pretty much melted, maybe a little bit higher. And just pressed it into this glass dish and slipped it in the fridge. Sorry about that. And I thought, man, I don't know if that's enough fat to hold this together. But basically, it worked out great. I'm looking for I'm going to go back to not sharing this screen. Sorry about the pause here, but it's right there. Duh. So anyways, if you don't want to make your own tallow, I bought this at the market. I think I bought this at Sprouts. It's about $10. They had another brand there as well. I really couldn't tell the difference between this tallow and the tallow I made. I made the tallow just by putting the beef fat, cutting into pieces, cutting all the meat out. If you got a little left in there, it's no big deal because you can strain it out later. Cut it into small pieces, put it in the crock pot, or a lot of people call it the slow cooker, and just let it go. I made a small batch on the stove where I just melted it. You don't want to get the tallow too hot. You don't want to burn it. A lot of people put water in there in the beginning, and the water helps start melting the tallow without burning. So once it starts turning into a liquid, you don't have to worry so much about it burning. And then the water just kind of evaporates out, and then you strain it. A lot of people squeeze it in a cheesecloth in order to get as much fat as possible out of the structural tissue that's kind of left behind, or the unmelted fat, the real stubborn fat. I just press it through a strainer. So anyways, if you want to do that, you can do that. It's probably cheaper, of course, to make it yourself, but you could also use this. And so anyways, I think I already showed you this is what it came out like. I thought it tastes really good. I don't really notice a liver flavor in it. It's much more solid than I thought it would be. Of course, you could add more fat, or you could add less fat, and you can add flavorings. But anyways, that was my little pemmican experiment, and I was very happy with it. Once you've done it one time, it's not that big a deal. It's really not much more work or hassle than cooking anything else. So anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate any support I can get. Go ahead and leave me comments, and please pass the link on to people who appreciate it, and maybe pass it on to somebody to help. Maybe somebody's trying to change their diet. maybe somebody, you know, like myself who had autoimmune diseases like arthritis and psoriasis, or maybe somebody who wants to lose weight, or maybe somebody who finds a drastic mood improvement by switching to a meat-based diet. Um, Somebody like that might benefit from it. But I appreciate it if people could subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell so you get a notification when a new video comes out. I've been trying to get at least one a week out, and hopefully I'll start increasing that. I've got a long list of things to do. I've got some other interviews tentatively lined up, so hopefully we can all sort of build a community where we can help each other, and we can help people have a better quality of life. Thanks again for watching. Feel better.